Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today I've got another mega benchmark video for you, this time comparing the GeForce RTX 4070 Ti head-to-head with the now 2.5-year-old RTX 3080 10GB. Of course, we'll be doing so in 50 games, though some titles have been tested using multiple different configurations, so for example with and without ray tracing. So there is a lot of data to go over, but before we do, today's sponsor spot is brought to you by MSI and the new Spatium SSD series. These PCIe 4.0 SSDs utilize the latest 3D NAND flash technology with capacities up to 4 terabytes and offer incredible speeds of up to 7 gigabytes per second for reads and 6.8 gigabytes per second for writes. They feature built-in data security with AES 256 encryption and E2E data protection, as well as error correction capabilities that extend the endurance and longevity of the NAND flash storage. You can also migrate data, monitor drive health and performance in real time with MSI Center, and for that extra peace of mind, all models are backed by a 5-year warranty from MSI. So for more information, please check the link in the video description. Now, you might be wondering why compare the RTX 4070 Ti with the RTX 3080? After all, they are meant to be two different classes of GPU. Thing is though, it's just a name, and companies like Nvidia, AMD, and Intel commonly use their established product families to upsell gamers, and that's exactly what's going on here. Roughly 2.5 years ago now, the RTX 3080 launched at $700 US, though due to the crypto boom, which took off just a month or so after release, getting one for that price was nearly impossible. That being the case, a year and a half later, Nvidia decided to take advantage of the then current market situation by re-releasing GO102 and GO104 with a minor spec bump, asking $1,200 US for the 3080 Ti and a more reasonable $600 US for the 3070 Ti. Still, a lot of you did purchase a 10GB RTX 3080, and many of you are probably considering the upgrade to a 40 series product. But of course, the problem being price. It's kind of gone up, and by a lot. The RTX 4070 Ti, for example, starts at $800 US, or at least that's where it should start. Most models are more like $850 or more. And worse still, if you want the more desirable RTX 4080, well, those things cost $1,200 US. I mean, they're meant to cost $1,200 US according to the MSRP, but in reality, they cost more like $1,300 US. Ouch. Anyway, if you currently own an original RTX 3080 and you're looking at an upgrade, does the RTX 4070 Ti have much to offer? As I've already noted, at MSRP it's 14% more expensive, and yet despite that, the die itself is 53% smaller, though it does manage to pack 27% more transistors thanks to the TSMC N4 process, which is a significant upgrade from Samsung's 8LPP process. The 4070 Ti also packs 8 times more L2 cache, going from a mere 6 MB to 48 MB. So while the core configuration sees less CUDA cores, IPC has been improved. However, there's no getting around the fact that although the 4070 Ti includes an extra 2 GB of VRAM, taking the total to 12 GB, memory bandwidth has been significantly reduced thanks to the much more limited 192-bit wide bus. And that's a massive downgrade when compared to the 320-bit wide bus of the RTX 3080, which when paired with 19 gigabits per second memory, resulted in a bandwidth of 760 gigabytes per second. So although the 4070 Ti uses even faster 21 gigabits per second GDDR6X memory, the much narrower bus sees bandwidth cut to just 504 gigabytes per second, and that's a massive 34% reduction. So in more memory sensitive scenarios, the 4070 Ti will likely suffer, and that's something that we're going to be looking at. Ultimately though, we want to see how the 3080 and 4070 Ti compare across a wide range of games, so let's go do that. For testing, the CPU used is the Ryzen 9 7950X3D, but with the second CCD disabled, and this has been done to ensure maximum performance in all games. So essentially we are testing with the yet to be released 7800X3D. This CPU has been tested on the Gigabyte X670E Aorus Master using 32GB of DDR5 6000 CL30 memory, and the latest AMD and Nvidia display drivers were also used. As usual, we'll go over the data for around a dozen of the titles tested before jumping into the big breakdown graphs, and the resolutions of interest here are 1440p and 4K, so let's get into it. Starting with Fortnite using DirectX 11 with the epic quality settings without any upscaling, we find that the 4070 Ti is 20% faster than the 3080 at 1440p, so not a big difference there, and the performance uplift is in line with the price increase. However, at the 4K resolution, we see a far more substantial 62% increase for the 4070 Ti, going from 52 FPS to a much more desirable 84 FPS. Basically, without the aid of upscaling, the 3080's performance is very janky at 4K with 1% lows of 29 FPS, making the 4070 Ti a much more capable 4K gamer in this example. Now this is interesting. Typically we've found Fortnite to run slower using DirectX 12, but have noted that if you're using a slower CPU, this might not be the case, but it also appears as though this could also apply to those of you using slower GPUs. At 1440p, the 4070 Ti dropped 32% of its original performance when using DirectX 11, whereas the 3080 dropped by 34%. Then at 4K, the 4070 Ti ran 26% slower with DirectX 12 opposed to DirectX 11, whereas the 3080 was actually 2% faster with a massive 59% improvement to the 1% lows. So the lower overhead of DirectX 12 is helping to improve the minimum frame rates here, but it is also capping the overall performance, at least in this example. The problem this DirectX 12 limitation has on high-end hardware is amplified when enabling hardware ray tracing, though we are still running into some pretty odd data here. The 4070 Ti is 23% faster than the 3080 at 1440p, which is about what you'd expect to see based on the previous data. However, it's the 4K results that are really surprising. Here the 3080 and 4070 Ti delivered similar performance. Whereas the 4070 Ti saw a 16% reduction in performance when compared to the DirectX 12 results with RT disabled, the 3080 saw a mere 4% decline. And remember, the non-RT results didn't utilize upscaling, so perhaps this is a result of setting the super resolution to quality mode for the ray tracing test. But whatever the case, the 3080 was surprisingly impressive here. Next up, we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, and here the 4070 Ti is 33% faster than the 3080 at 1440p and 30% faster at 4K, so strong performance gains there from the newer, but also more expensive Ada Lovelace GPU. Okay, so here we have another example, this time in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, where the 4070 Ti beats the 3080 by a fairly comfortable margin at 1440p, 17% in this example, but then only basically matched it at the more demanding 4K resolution. And the reason for this is almost certainly down to the difference in memory bandwidth, a factor that plays a more key role as the resolution increases. And it's a similar story with ray tracing enabled, along with FSR2. The 4070 Ti was 27% faster than the 3080 at 1440p, and despite that massive win, it was just 3% faster at 4K. The F122 results are more what you'd typically expect to see, with the 4070 Ti delivering 17% more frames at 1440p and 26% more at 4K. Clearly, this game isn't heavy on memory usage, so the more limited bandwidth of the 4070 Ti isn't an issue. Warhammer 40,000 Darktide was tested using the highest quality preset with ray tracing enabled, and this saw the 3080 dip below 60 FPS at 1440p, making the 4070 Ti 18% faster. Then at 4K, the average frame rate of the 4070 Ti was 33% greater, but both suffered from stuttering issues with 1% lows of just 12 FPS. The results for A Plague Tale Requiem favoured the 4070 Ti at both tested resolutions, so a 16% performance advantage at 1440p and 10% at 4K, again suggesting that performance starts to become more memory bandwidth bound on the 4070 Ti as the resolution increases. Next up, we have the Callisto Protocol, and here the 4070 Ti is 30% faster than the 3080 at 1440p, while that margin is reduced to 24% at 4K. The game does use FSR2 with the ultra quality preset, that's the default configuration, so we haven't altered it, but needless to say, frame rates would be lower at the native resolution. Atomic Heart is another game where the 3080 fares much better relative to the 4070 Ti as the resolution increases. For example, at 1440p, the 4070 Ti is 36% faster than the 3080, which is a massive margin, and although it's still 24% faster at 4K, that's a significant reduction compared to what we saw at 1440p. Interestingly, performance in Cyberpunk 2077 is much more competitive, even with ray tracing disabled. Using the high quality settings, the 4070 Ti was just 10% faster at 1440p with comparable 1% lows. Then at 4K, performance was much the same, 43 FPS versus 44 FPS, so a mere 2% difference there. Now, Given what we saw in Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing disabled, these results might be a little bit surprising, though having said that, Ada Lovelace is meant to be more efficient when it comes to RT performance. And that is certainly the case here, as the 4070 Ti is now 29% faster than the 3080 at 1440p and 22% faster at 4K, so those are some solid performance gains. Like Cyberpunk 2077, I've tested Hogwarts Legacy with and without ray tracing enabled, and we'll start with the standard Ultra results. Here the 3080 and 4070 Ti are surprisingly similar at both tested resolutions. The new Ada Lovelace GPU is just 6% faster at 1440p and a mere 4% faster at 4K. But now with ray tracing enabled, the 4070 Ti does extend its lead out to 12% at 1440p, rendering 65 FPS on average. However, 4K is too much even for a 12GB VRAM buffer, so under these conditions, both models were a stuttery mess in our test. And the latest Hogwarts Legacy patch hasn't addressed this issue, if having high quality textures with the added load of ray tracing is an actual issue. In any case, the 3080 does suffer from noticeably worse visuals, with lots of compressed textures and significant pop-in, but it does work at 1440p, at least in our testing. Okay, so we've taken a detailed look at just a few of the 50 individual games tested. Now it's time to compare the GeForce RTX 4070 Ti and RTX 3080 across all of the games tested, and we will start with the 1440p data. Okay, so at 1440p, the RTX 4070 Ti was on average 21% faster than the 3080 10GB, so a fairly significant uplift there, and really that would be an amazing result had the 4070 Ti not cost more. In fact, at MSRP it is 14% more expensive, though at retail it's more like 20% more expensive. So basically, the 4070 Ti offers the same cost per frame as the 3080, or a very slight improvement when looking strictly at the MSRP. The biggest wins for the 4070 Ti came in Forza Horizon 5, Atomic Heart, Modern Warfare 2, Dying Light 2 without ray tracing, Gears 5, Halo Infinite, Hitman 3, and the Callisto Protocol. The smallest wins were mostly seen when CPU limited in titles such as ACC, CSGO, PUBG, War Thunder, and Hogwarts Legacy with RT disabled. Now, at the 4K resolution, the overall margin was slightly reduced to 18% in favour of the RTX 4070 Ti. Fortnite using DirectX 11 was the big outlier here, providing the 4070 Ti with a massive 62% win, though titles such as Forza Horizon 5 and Modern Warfare 2 again were very positive for the newer GPU. As you'd expect, there were less CPU limited results at 4K, but there are also more instances where the 4070 Ti suffered due to its more limited memory bandwidth. So there you have it. On average, the RTX 4070 Ti is 18 to 21% faster than the RTX 3080 10GB, depending on the resolution, with margins as great as 62%, though more typically peaking around 30 to 40%. And we saw no examples where the RTX 3080 actually beat the 4070 Ti, but there were some where performance came out pretty much the same. Looking back at my day one review data for the 4070 Ti, I found that on average it was 21% faster than the 3080 at 4K, so despite expanding the testing from 16 games to 50, we found the exact same margin. And this is a disappointing result that clearly demonstrates just how underwhelming this latest generation of graphics products are from both AMD and Nvidia. At MSRP, the 4070 Ti is a mere 5% improvement in cost per frame when compared to the RTX 3080, basically providing gamers with the same level of value almost 2.5 years later. In fact, it's worse than that because at present the 4070 Ti typically costs $850, making it 2% more costly per frame when compared to the old 3080. But hey, at least you get DLSS frame generation. On the 4070 Ti, that is, you 3080 peasants miss out on that one, and I'm sure that's by no means meant to incentivize you to spend more on a 4070 Ti or 4080. Nah, that wouldn't be it. Technical reasons for sure. Realistically, you'd have to be coming from, say, a 2080 or 2080 Super for the 4070 Ti to make sense. Those products cost around $700 to $800 US back in the day, and while they represented fairly poor value when compared to the Pascal generation that came before, going from a 2080 series graphics card to a 4070 Ti for roughly the same money, that would be a massive upgrade. Anyway, as I said in my Radeon RX 7900 XT versus GeForce RTX 4070 Ti comparison, neither of those products represent good value or anything remotely verging on good value. But they're also as good as it gets today at this performance tier. Therefore, it does appear as though AMD and Nvidia are working together to beat gamers into submission, and if that is the case, then I don't expect this situation to improve. It's likely GPU upgrades at the same price point are only going to make sense every 5 years or so. At least that's how things currently stand. That means RTX 3080 owners will be best off holding out for at least another generation, and if games in a year or so are hitting that 10GB VRAM buffer a bit too hard, you just have to accept lowering texture quality settings, which will probably be acceptable. At least most of you will probably find that acceptable, given that at that point it will be quite an old graphics card, despite the fact that it was once sort of a flagship product. Anyway, that is going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give it one of those. You can subscribe for more content because we will have a few more big GPU head-to-heads coming up on the channel, and then some CPU content, couple of good things in the works there, so make sure you look out for those. Also, if you'd like to support the channel more directly, we have Floatplane or Patreon. Signing up to either one of those will give you access to our exclusive Discord server, a monthly live streams with Tim and myself, behind the scenes content, and Q&A. So some pretty cool stuff there, worth checking out. But if you're not interested, that is perfectly fine. And I would like to thank you for watching this video. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time.